Good evening. I'm Patty Muldoon, representing the League of Women Voters of Arlington, and we want to welcome you to Arlington's Candidates Night for the town election on Saturday, April 6, 2019. Candidates Night is sponsored by both Envision Arlington and the League of Women Voters of Arlington. Tonight's video program is being broadcast live by Arlington Community Media, ACMi. So we would like to thank ACMi's Executive Director, Norm McAleod, who's hiding back here, Operations Manager Jeff Monroe, Government Access Coordinator Sean Keene, and the rest of the staff and volunteers at ACMi for broadcasting tonight's event and for the rebroadcasts on the government channels, Comcast Channel 22, RCN Channel 15, and RCN's High Definition Channel 614, and Verizon Channel 26. For those of you watching later on Arlington Community Media, it's now 8 p.m. on Wednesday, March 27th in the Robbins Memorial Town Hall. It is my pleasure to introduce Candidates Night, which presents candidates for your local offices. Candidates Night is a nonpartisan service providing information to all our voters. Membership in the League of Women Voters is open to women and men. Throughout our 99-year history, the League has built a nationally respected reputation for providing candidates forums and debates for the benefit of voters and for supporting informed participation and understanding of government and public policy issues. Based on grassroots membership input, the League seeks to influence public policy through education and advocacy. The League of Women Voters takes action on specific issues that we have studied, but we never support or oppose candidates as an organization. Tonight's program will include statements from candidates and a question and answer period. So, audience members, some of you have submitted questions in advance, and we encourage you to go to the back, write a card if you've got some questions that you think of them very, very soon. The questions will be reviewed by a committee of League members and a representative from Envision Arlington to represent the issues of concerns to the audience. And then the moderator will present the questions to the candidates. So once again, as a courtesy reminder, please turn off those cell phones. And please hold your applause until the end of the candidates' presentations for each office, so when the office debate is done. Thank you. I would now like to introduce our friend and guest moderator, Margaret Copey, of the League of Women Voters of Lexington. Margaret.
Good evening. Thank you, Patty, and thank you to the League of Women Voters of Arlington for inviting me back again. I enjoy coming here every year, and I hope this keeps up a tradition as long as I'm able to. I'd like to outline the procedures and rules for this evening. There is one uncontested seat for assessor for a 3-year term. The candidate, Bob Greeley, is not present tonight. There is one uncontested seat for housing authority for a 5-year term. The candidate is, I hope I'm saying this right, Gar Talanian, who is not present tonight. The candidates for town offices will appear in this order this evening: moderator, school committee, and then select board. Due to the allocated cable TV broadcast time, we will conclude the program at 9:30 p.m., and there will be no intermission. So now let's get to what the candidates could expect. Each candidate will make an introductory statement with 2 minutes allowed. The candidates will speak in the order in which they appear on the ballot. To ensure fairness, each candidate will have a time warning from the League timers in the first row. When 20 seconds remain, the timer will hold up a yellow card. Could you hold up the yellow card just so everyone can see it? Thank you. When the time is up, a red card will be raised. Okay. At that point, the candidate should only finish a short sentence and stop. After the candidates have finished their statements, we will have questions and answers, As mentioned before, the audience can submit questions on cards at the table in the back of the auditorium. All candidates will have the opportunity to answer each question for their office. The candidate with second placement on the ballot will be the first to answer the first question, and we will continue to rotate through the ballot in order for each question. After the questions and answers, each candidate may make a 1-minute closing statement with the same time indicators. The candidates will speak in reverse ballot order for their closing statements. We ask for the cooperation of all candidates in following these rules so that everyone will have a fair chance. And as a reminder, that since this is being carried live and will be rebroadcast, we ask the candidates to speak directly into the microphone so they can be heard. So, our first candidate tonight is for moderator. There is a 1 seat open for a 3-year term. There is one candidate, John D. Leone. Mr. Leone. Oh, I'm not ready. I forgot to turn the page here. The town moderator assists in the formation of the warrant and is the chairperson of town meeting, recognizing speakers, calling for motions and votes, announcing the votes and tallies on all town warrant articles, and keeping order at all time while town meeting is in session. This person is in charge of the process and keeps the meeting in compliance with the rules of order for item-by-item discussion of the articles. Following the meeting, the moderator approves the record of votes prepared by the town clerk for submission to the state. We will now hear opening remarks from the candidate, Mr. Leone. You have 2 minutes.
Good evening. John Leone, I'm the moderator. I'm running again for moderator. You might wonder why I'm here. Well, I don't take my position for granted. I think that I have to continually earn it from the citizens of Arlington, and that I ask that you please vote for me again this year. And during my terms as moderator since 2008, I've introduced a number of changes to town meeting. I've introduced the electronic timer, electronic voting, which records how each and every one of the town meeting member votes, and we put that up on the website afterwards so all the people can see, so all the new town meeting members who are in here this evening, your votes are going to be recorded. It also acts as a attendance, so we know if you're coming or not, which is good because if you're a voter, you can see who you don't want to vote for if they don't show up. So I do encourage you to go to the website and check out and make sure your members who are running again actually come to town meeting. We've introduced the electronic projection system and the consent agenda. These are just a couple of the things that I've brought forward as improvements to town meeting, in my view. It has modernized it, and doesn't quite have the feel of an old-timey town meeting, but this is the modern age. And I ask for your vote this year, and I won't take too much more of your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leone. The first question from the audience. Precincts 3, and I think this is a 16 and 17, is that right, have less than 4 town meeting member candidates to fill the 4 3-year terms, and Precinct 20 has no candidate to fill a 1-year term. Could you please explain how to run a write-in campaign?
Well, the easiest way is to go to the stationery store and buy a whole bunch of those little stickers, print your name on them, and show up at the polling place. Hand them out to the people going in, ask them to stick it on the ballot, and check your name. You probably will get elected. If not, just go and talk to your neighbors, talk to your family members who live in your precinct, ask them to write your name in and vote. We have just those 4 or 5 open spots this year, which is very good. In the past, we've had a lot more, and I think part of that is the town meeting is come into the modern age. We have a lot younger candidates, so don't feel that you have to be a long-time Arlingtonian. Anybody can be a town meeting member.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a follow-up question.
Sure.
Can voters write in a name on the ballot? Is that a possibility?
Yep. There's a blank line.
So if my friend is in precinct 20, I could write that person's name in, and that would get counted. And I think you mentioned, but I would like to remind you that not only do you have to put the sticker or write the name, you have to check the box.
You've got to check the box. Yes.
Yes, people forget to do that.
Otherwise, the electronic reader won't read it.
Right.
Fill in the oval.
Yes, fill in the oval.
We all knew what we were talking about. Okay.
with the little funky pen they give you.
Okay, question 2. How do we expedite the announcements and other non-legislative items on the floor of town meeting?
2 years ago, I'd instituted a rule making that 4 minutes, thanks to Paul Schlickman last year. Was it last year, Paul? We made a 4-minute bylaw that the people can, on announcements and presentations prior to town meeting, are limited to 4 minutes. So we have expedited it. And the other thing I like to encourage people is don't read your reports. We're all adults. We know how to read. Summarize for us.
Thank you, and I'm going to take the liberty here of asking a follow-up question.
Sure.
When you're talking about a 4-minute limit on a presentation,
Nope.
that's a non-legislative or an announcement. But what about when you're actually moving an article and having a presentation from proponents?
You get 7 minutes.
You do limit that?
By law. By law.
By your town bylaw? Okay.
Bylaws provide, first time anybody gets to the microphone, it's 7 minutes. Second time is 5 minutes. So that includes the presenter of an article, the movement, or anyone opposing it, or just getting up to speak.
Okay.
And that's what our timer's for.
Okay.
That's it.
Those are the questions from the audience, so we'll move now to your closing statement. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Please vote for me. And thank you. Thank you to Vision Arlington, League of Women Voters, Ms. Coakley, and to ACMi. Good evening. Check the website.
Would the candidates for school committee please come up to the stage? We will now hear from the candidates for school committee. There are 2 candidates for 2 seats, each for a 3-year term. The candidates are Leonard J. Cardin and Kiersey Allison Ampey. The 7 members of the school committee serve 3-year overlapping terms. They set policy for Arlington's public school system and appoint staff to implement these under the state laws and the policies of the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The committee appoints a superintendent as chief administrator of the school department to make recommendations on personnel and programs. The school committee is responsible for the school department's annual budget and represents the town in collective bargaining with the teachers. We will hear opening statements from the candidates in the order they appear on the ballot. The first candidate is Mr. Cardin. Mr. Cardin.
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and Envision Arlington for hosting this forum, Margaret Copey for moderating, and ACMi for broadcasting it. I am running for a 2nd term on the school committee to continue the work we have done over the last years to strengthen our school system and plan for the future. We've had a busy 3 years. We passed the debt exclusion package in 2016 and completed classroom additions at Thompson and Hardy, the renovation of the Gibbs School, and the design for the new high school. I'm particularly proud of the innovations included in the opening of Gibbs, such as project-based learning, responsive classroom, and a softer transition from elementary to secondary schools. After much effort, we released this week the first draft of a 5-year budget plan for the schools, which is driven by needs rather than a funding formula. Included in the plan are initiatives to address enrollment growth, close the achievement gap, improve instruction for students, ensure safe and supportive schools, and attract and develop talented staff. We have worked hard to win support for funding for the plan, and I am pleased that the override being considered includes a phase-in of funding. My highest priority for the second term is to secure passage of the debt exclusion for the high school and the operating override. We need a new high school to accommodate the increasing enrollment and address a deteriorating building that no longer meets educational needs. We also need to address a growing mismatch between town revenue and town spending, particularly as Arlington's student enrollment has surged. Once we get past the June votes, I plan to focus on further refining and implementing the 5-year budget plan. We need to enhance our strategic planning efforts and also revamp our annual goal process. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Allison Ampey.
Hi, I'm Kiersey Allison Ampey, and I'm not yelling even though my name looks like I am. I'm running for school committee for the 4th time. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters, Envision Arlington, ACMi, our moderator, and my fellow candidate for making this debate possible. Over the past 9 years, I've served in many roles on school committee, most recently serving again as chair. Last year, I was on our negotiations team, helping us achieve a successful contract with our teachers union. Previously, as budget chair, I've also led major changes in how we manage our special education circuit breaker funds, increasing budgetary transparency and fiscal stability. However, the action that brings me the greatest pride is my work towards increasing the funds Arlington receives from the state. In 2015, I co-authored Arlington's letter to the state legislature about the need to increase the foundation budget, co-signed by many Arlington officials. In 2017, I testified before the Joint Committee on Education about the same need. For the first time this year, the governor's budget contains a significant increase in educational funding, including a potentially almost $2 million in additional funds for Arlington. I believe our actions have made a difference. Over the next months and years, there's more work to be done. The first is the need to rebuild our high school. There are many reasons it's time: accreditation warning for poor facilities, enrollment pressures, and the changing needs of education. By rebuilding now, we can take advantage of almost 1/3 the cost being funded by the MSBA, a huge savings for Arlington's taxpayers. The second need is to address the school's funding needs. I'm really excited by the vision that's outlined in our first multi-year plan. It has two major components: increased positions to backfill the existing needs stemming from years of growing enrollment and underfunding, and additional funds towards taking the schools to a higher level. I'll be working also to see this implemented. In conclusion, I hope you vote for me again for school committee so I can keep working hard on your behalf for Arlington's students, teachers, and schools.
Thank you, Ms. Allison MP. We will now start with questions, and you will answer the question first. The question is, has the opening of the Gibbs as a 6th grade only school gone as planned?
I feel it has. It's still a work in progress. I don't have a student there, so I'm not as in tune with the day-to-day actions, but I'm hearing really good things about the project-based learning that Mr. Carden referred to already. The kids having their own school where they can have an emphasis on social emotional learning and a situation that's more appropriate for 6th graders as opposed to something that's built more for 7th and 8th.
Thank you. Mr. Carden?
Thank you. Yes, I believe that the school opening at Gibbs has gone very well. With any large undertaking, there's always hiccups, but hopefully this next year those will mostly be worked out. We did have a report from the principal at our last meeting, a preliminary report, and she was pleased with everything. Her plan is to keep everything sort of the way it is for 2 years, to let everything settle in, and then to start making adjustments if they're needed to the programming or the schedule or the basic structure. But there were some significant changes. Our middle school our Addison Middle School is at a 4-day schedule. Gibbs has a 6-day schedule. The clusters, the learning communities are much smaller, and all of those things have really improved the environment and again, the transition from elementary school where you have 1 teacher to middle school where you suddenly have 6 teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will be starting with you, Mr. Carden. What would happen if the budget for the high school project approved by the Mass School Building Authority, MSBA, is exceeded?
My understanding is that we would do everything in our power not to have that happen. That could include, taking things out of the project. So there's turf fields that we're doing in the back. There's, there's an amphitheater. There's things outside of the actual structure that, if absolutely necessary, could be taken out and done as a separate project later on if the town decided to do that. So I'm optimistic that I have a lot of confidence in the team that's putting it all together. We do not have a construction company engaged yet, and that will be sort of a final confirmation of the numbers. But hopefully everything will go well, and we won't have to take those steps.
Thank you. Ms. Allison Ampe.
So the bottom line is it will not happen and it cannot happen. We cannot go, no, legally we cannot exceed the budget that we have set. So as Mr. Carden said, if the costs come in and it looks like it would be in danger of exceeding it, we will do cuts in other things, the fields, changing the materials that are being used to build either exterior or interior, anywhere that cost-cutting measures could be made will happen. But the bottom line is the final budget that is approved by the MSBA is the final budget, and there will be no excess.
Okay, thank you. The next question, we'll start with you, Ms. Allison Ampe. How large are class sizes, and do you see the need for more revisions to the buffer zones for the school districts?
Class sizes right now are running the lower years, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, some are running higher than we would like to see. Some are 23, 25 students. I don't remember what the exact average is across the district, but part of the reason that we would consider doing buffer zones, one is to try and continue evening out the class sizes. The other reason would be because we have uneven growth across the town. There have been greater numbers of students there have been greater numbers of students enrolling in schools on the eastern side of town than on the west. And if we can circle some of them towards the more open space in the west, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Mr. Carden?
Thank you. So at our elementary schools, most of the classes are between 20 and 25. There may be a couple that are at 26 right at the very moment. The ones that are 25 and 26 are on the little high side, but again, with the resources and the space we have, that's pretty close to the best we can do right now. As far as buffer zones go, we do look at that every year, take a more serious look at it every few years to see if the zones are big enough. We would probably not reduce them because that would limit our flexibility, but there may be some areas where we need to increase them. There hasn't been a glaring need for that. There are some large classes at Brackett this year, but that was more of a timing issue than a buffer zone issue. So, the administration does use those buffer zones to try to balance class sizes. But sometimes over the summer, once assignments have already been made, there's an influx of new students, and that gets all washed out.
Thank you. I'll go to question 4, and we will start with you, Mr. Carden. What is happening at the state level with regard to school funding, and how does that impact our local budget decisions?
Thanks. So there's a lot happening at the state level. There was a hearing on education funding just last week that had hundreds of people attend. And it was an 8-hour hearing and lots of good discussion about ways to increase state funding. So I think we're moving in the direction of increased state funding. The question now is the amount and how that will be distributed. The governor's budget proposal, which is sort of the minimum, included a $200 million increase in state education funding. Some of that would have happened anyways, so his actually is proposing basically a $60 million increase in new money, and there's lots of other proposals that will increase that further. As far as what Arlington is going to do with that, we are having those discussions. That was part of the purpose of doing the 5-year plan, was to give a roadmap of how we, the school department, wanted to spend that money. And we are optimistic that if an override does pass, that will, combined with the state money, help us get some of those things accomplished.
Thank you. Ms. Allison Ampe?
Mr. Carden's really nicely laid out what's happening at the state level. At the local level, we're still discussing how much we believe the increase in educational funding will continue year to year. And that's part of what we're having to take into consideration as we plan for the future in terms of thinking about the override amount. We right now are I think the current expectations are that we do expect that we will get this increased amount in Chapter 70 funds this year, but we're not expecting tremendous increases in the coming years. It'd be nice, it'd be wonderful if we get that, but we're just not sure it's going to happen. So,
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Ms. Allison Ampe. Are there any improvements or discussions on LGBTQ community in the schools, that is, specialized series, curriculum, etc.?
I am unaware of any specific improvements of LGBTQ curriculum. What we have done is, there is discussion. It's not curriculum, but as we are building the new high school, we are actively thinking about that in terms of restroom facilities, locker rooms. So we're putting, the new high school will have a much better situation for the physical needs of those students. And there has been clubs open at both the Audison and at AHS about LGBTQ and issue. It's LGBTQ and friends, but I'm not aware of any specific curriculum changes. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Cardin?
Thanks. Yes, so just to echo what Dr. Allison Ampe said, those clubs at the high school and middle school are also involved in piloting and implementing upstander training. I serve as a liaison to the Arlington Education Foundation, which is supporting a grant to help them do that, and the school department is helping them as well. And then there will be efforts to extend that training down to the elementary schools. There's an active diversity interest group that's been organized by parents at many of the elementary schools that can also support this effort. We haven't seen any significant curriculum initiatives in this area, but it's certainly something we can look into going forward.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Cardin. Please comment on the implementation of the 5-year budgeting plan.
Thanks. So the plan is very new. We've been finalizing it and just published it this week, and we still need to get public feedback. There will be a public forum at the Gibbs School on April 10th at 7 o'clock if people are interested in hearing more about the plan and giving us some feedback on the elements of it. We know over the last few years with our enrollment growth, we've been focused mostly on classroom teachers. So we haven't been able to address some of the other things, or minimally have addressed social and emotional learning and other needs in our district. So there's a lot of that in the plan. There's a lot of that in the first couple years of the plan. And clearly we're not going to have enough money to implement all of that, but we do have a priority list for next year. And we are optimistic that we'll be able to start checking off and implementing some of those things over the next few years.
Thank you. Ms. Allison Ampe?
Just to build on what Mr. Cardin's already said, one of the things that I think is the most interesting that will be part of the implementation of the 5-year budget plan is to have a specialist, dedicated specialist for art, music at every elementary school. And what that allows is first common planning time for teachers, which is helpful for them working together and getting the curriculum straightened out. But the other thing it allows is the ability to break. All the students will be able to have math at the same time, all the same grade level, and this allows the teachers to break them all into different level groupings and allows children who need extra help from the math coaches and stuff, they can be in one group and be able to receive that differentiated instruction, which right now is really difficult to deliver across the board evenly to all students.
Thank you. This will be the last question before we go to closing statements, and we will start with Ms. Allison Ampe. Okay. I am concerned about the potential increased demand in our already stretched thin schools. Can you talk about how the current schools can handle the increased population?
So increased enrollment is always a concern. It's something that we pay close attention to. We have been building in capacity by creating an addition at the Hardy and at the Thompson School, by expanding the middle school to have 2 schools, the Gibbs and Ottoson, and the high school will be the next place where we're working to increase positions, or increase seats for students, where right now our total enrollment at the high school is about 1,360, and the design enrollment for the high school is going to be 1,755. So there's a lot of room for enrollment increase there.
Mr. Cardin?
Yes, so certainly it's always a concern of all of us. Every year we sort of anxiously await the kindergarten numbers, because that's where we've been seeing the increase. This year we have 580 people enrolled in kindergarten. At one point we thought it was going to be 600. And at some point, though, there's only so many houses in town, and they have been turning over to families with children. In East Arlington in particular, we've had more families with children staying in condos that we didn't used to have. But eventually, there has to be an end to that, because there isn't a whole lot of construction in Arlington. So we do expect that the entering numbers are going to level off around 580 or 550. And we do have enough space if that occurs. If it continues to grow, if there is some sort of huge increase, if there's new development, then once again a few years from now we're going to have to look at space. But for now, we do have adequate space for everyone.
Thank you. We're now going to go to the closing statements. We will hear from the school committee in reverse ballot order. You each have 1 minute to speak, and we will start with Ms. Allison Ampe.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters, Envision Arlington, ACMi, and our moderator for giving us this opportunity to discuss issues around our schools. Thank you also to Mr. Cardin for the interesting conversation, and especially thank you to our audience here and at home for listening. I've tried to demonstrate how I use my experience to make my decisions. I bring several types of experience to my 4th term: involvement as a long-term parent in our schools, a deep understanding of the work done by school committee, and direct participation in making financial decisions here in Arlington. All of these combine to make me a very effective school committee member. I hope you'll allow me to keep working on behalf of our students, teachers, and schools for 3 more years, and I respectfully request one of your 2 votes on Saturday, April 6th.
Thank you. Mr. Cardin.
Thanks. I want to again thank Margaret Copey, the League of Women Voters, Envision Arlington, ACMi, and the audience here and at home. Even though this race is uncontested, I am grateful for the opportunity to discuss some of the issues facing our schools. I do hope people will vote on April 6th and will vote on June 11th also to support the high school in the override. Thank you.
Thank you. And a round of applause for the candidates. Thank you. Will the candidates for Select Board please come to the stage? We will now hear from the candidates for Select Board. There's 1 seat open for a 3-year term. There are 2 candidates, Stephen DeCourcy and Robert L. Tosi, Jr. The 5 members of the Select Board serve 3-year overlapping terms. They act as the town's executive branch to formulate town policy, ensure compliance with state laws, and administer many town meeting decisions. The board appoints the town manager to be the professional manager of town services and departments, except for the schools. The Select Board members also serve as the Board of Public Works and the Board of Survey, compile the warrant, grant licenses and permits, appoint election officers, review budgets, and settle claims against the town. The members announce all elections, attend hearings and other town functions, and deal with traffic and safety matters. So we will now hear opening statements from the candidates in the order in which they appear on the ballot. The first candidate is Mr. DeCoursey. Mr. DeCoursey, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Steve DeCoursey. Thank you to the League and to Envision Arlington for hosting this debate. I'm running for Select Board because I believe I can make a difference in offering leadership and finding solutions to the challenges that Arlington will face over the next 3 years. I'm proud to have grown up in Arlington. I attended our public schools, including Arlington High, where I met my wife, Mary. Each of our 3 children attended the public schools, with Mark still a senior at AHS. I have a long history of government service in Arlington. From 1995 until this past February, when I stepped down to run for Select Board, I was a member of the town's Finance Committee. I've represented Precinct 2 for the past 19 years in town meeting. I also served on the Sims Advisory Committee. In the community, I've held a number of leadership positions in different groups. I served at the Arlington Boys and Girls Club as a board member and club president. In addition, I've coached numerous girls and boys youth sports teams. In 1998, I served as a precinct captain for the debt exclusion that resulted in funding for the Pierce, Bishop, and Hardy schools. More recently, I served as a town-wide co-chair for the successful 2016 debt exclusion campaign for our schools. Professionally, I'm an attorney with extensive experience in municipal law. Arlington faces many challenges over the next 3 years. In the short term, this June, we will have a debt exclusion vote for Arlington High School and an override vote to address our fiscal stability. I support both. Next fiscal year, we will renovate our senior center and move forward on plans to rebuild the DPW yard. Other challenges will appear that will require creative thinking and direction from the Select Board. If elected, I will listen to Arlington residents and take your concerns into account in acting independently on the Select Board to offer solutions and provide leadership to our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeCoursey. Mr. Tosi.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret Copey, the moderator tonight, League of Women Voters of Arlington and Vision Arlington for co-sponsoring the event, ACMi for taping it, my fellow candidate and friend, Steve DeCoursey, for running a positive campaign, and especially to all of you who are coming here interested in town issues and affairs, and those watching at home on ACMi on cable. My name is Bob Tosi Jr. I'm a candidate for the Select Board, formerly known as the Board of Selectmen. I'm not only a lifelong resident, I'm a lifelong engaged, active, and involved citizen. I not only want to make a difference, I have been making a difference my entire adult lifehood. Starting in 1987 as a high school student, I ran for town meeting and have served ever since for 31 years. I wanted to get more involved, joined the Finance Committee and served there for 12 years, continuing my service on the Council on Aging Board for the last 17 years, and I've served the needy of our town, food pantry, St. Vincent de Paul Society, and so many other ways, including over 20 other civic, community, and active volunteer groups in Arlington. Arlington, as we know, is a very desirable place to live, work, and raise a family, but we still have our challenges. As was mentioned, we have a structural deficit, we have a debt exclusion vote for the rebuild of the Arlington High School, we have some complex zoning articles to face at town meeting, and many other challenges. But my involvement, my experience, and my willingness to listen will all be important to make me the best choice for your vote for a Select Board in Arlington. I look forward to your questions tonight and every opportunity I have to hear from you, the voters of Arlington. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we will now go to the questions. And the first speaker for question 1 will be Mr. Tosi. And just to let you know that 6 separate people submitted this question, so we consolidated it. What is your opinion on the election or appointment of the town clerk, and do you know how many town clerks are elected in Massachusetts?
Well, as far as the consideration of appointing a town clerk, we had a vigorous debate over appointing the town treasurer. Now, the town treasurer, both from Steve Gilligan and John Billiford before him, served this town very well and ably for many years. But there was a good argument there for at least appointing the town treasurer, because that was consolidating our financial operations. The town clerk's office operates independently and serves this town tremendously and does not need to be an appointed position to take away another position in town that the town of Arlington votes for and holds accountable individually. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeCoursey?
Yes, I agree with Mr. Tozy on the clerk position. And just as he said, we had a long discussion over the years in town meeting about the treasurer's position, and clearly the trend in municipal finance was to have a appointed treasurer. I don't see that, at least here in Arlington, or the need for that here in Arlington right now. So I would continue to support an elected clerk.
Thank you. The next question will be starting with you, Mr. DeCoursey, and the question is, and there were four people submitted this question, what is your vision for how Arlington will meet its responsibility to provide affordable housing?
Yep. Thank you for the question. So we've got a number of challenges, both in Arlington and in the region, frankly, for the creation of affordable housing. And I think in the short term, we're going to see some development by the Housing Corporation. They're creating affordable units. There also are a number of zoning articles that are going to be before town meeting that create the opportunity for affordable housing. There may not be a guarantee that affordable housing comes out of it, but there are changes that create that possibility. And on those changes, the executive director of the Housing Corporation actually supports them. That means a lot to me in terms of what that future could be. In terms of what else can we do, there are zoning changes, as we've talked about, increased density and zoning density bonuses that the redevelopment board is talking about and possibly presenting to town meeting that could create that opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Tozy?
Yes, Arlington was a little late in voting for the whole affordable housing bylaw that required buildings to provide affordable housing when they built a certain size units in town. So we missed that opportunity, and a lot of growth and development that did happen. And where it does happen now, unfortunately, loopholes are found, and they're able to sometimes work around that zoning requirement and not build affordable housing, and that should not be happening. We need to be able to provide affordable housing for those that are in need. Yes, the Housing Corporation is a private corporation and does the best they can with private funds to buy properties, apartment buildings, refurnish, and they are kept in eternity for low-income and moderate-income residents. So I hope more of that continues. We need more of that. Arlington is diverse in every way except for economic diversity. We need to really provide the affordable housing for our residents.
Thank you. And the next question will start with you, Mr. Tozy. Operating overrides are set by the Select Board. If elected, would you vote to support the current override proposal to be put on the June ballot?
Absolutely. There was some town meeting members that asked me tonight whether town meeting was going to vote on the having an override on the ballot, and I clarified that it is the Select Board that decides to put it on the ballot. But the Proposition 2.5 allowed that structure, that mechanism to ask the voters to raise their taxes for the benefit of all, for the benefit of the community. And I wouldn't support the override. We unfortunately have a structural deficit here in Arlington. Too much is on our residential base because we have so few businesses in town. So we need to work to increase our business environment and to take a little bit of the burden off of the residents. We'll never have that much to alleviate it greatly, but we need to do what we can to help those in need.
Thank you. Mr. DeCoursey?
Yes, I support the override as well. The proposal, which will actually be voted on by the Select Board, or the new Select Board at their first meeting in April, calls for a $5.6 million number. I point out that that's actually less than the amount of our last override, and as a percentage of the tax levy, it's a lower percentage. So for the past 8 years, we've had outstanding fiscal management in town. The 2011 override was guaranteed, or a commitment was made not to come back for at least 3 years. Here we are 8 years later, there's a lesser amount that's going to be asked, and there's a longer commitment if the new select board passes those objectives, which would be at least 4 years. And I will support that, and I think it's part of the plan. It's appropriate to go back to the voters with that question.
Thank you. The next question, we start with Mr. DeCoursey. Are you for or against the proposed upzoning, which are zoning changes allowing higher, denser building in exchange for more affordable housing construction?
Yeah, so there are a number of density articles that are before town meeting, and they follow the master plan that was passed 4 years ago in the housing production plan. I support the changes that are being proposed. Now, tonight, even as we're in this hall, the redevelopment board is making their final votes on their recommendations on the zoning changes, and there were some issues that I raised at our last debate in terms of some concerns on maybe there's too much density in terms of building heights and building setbacks. I think some of those are being addressed. I support it, but I also want to point out that any zoning change must be approved by a 2/3 vote at town meeting. The redevelopment board is having 4 public sessions where they'll take questions. I think it's important for the community and for town meeting members to take advantage of that period because there hasn't been a lot of question and answer during the hearings. There's an opportunity to do it now before we come to town meeting on April 22nd.
Thank you. Mr. Tosi?
This is an area where Steve and I do differ. I am at this point not in favor of the zoning density articles. As he said, the final recommendation isn't before us to be able to even vote on intelligently, but if you try to look at it, the draft zoning bylaws amendments by the ARB is 42 pages. There's a lot of detail, there's a lot of information. Many times we even pass one zoning article in town meeting, and then we have to go back the next year because to tweak it or change it because there was oversights or forgotten details of it. And those details can be have very bad consequences because the developers can build in that 1 year time. This all came from the Metro Mayors Coalition. Arlington is one of 15 communities. We're only one of 3 towns, along with Winthrop and Brookline, that are on this Mayors Coalition to build housing production plan. Arlington is already very dense. We provide the housing and the employees for the businesses in Boston and Cambridge. It's time for Arlington to have businesses here and not be providing more for Boston.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Tosi. Recreational marijuana is coming to Arlington. How do you think the board can lead on this issue and address concerns?
Well, town meeting took a lead on this when we voted for the parameters under which the marijuana outlets can be here in Arlington with buffer zones around the schools and the parks. This was voted on statewide. I wasn't necessarily in favor of it personally, but that was the choice of the voters. And so with those parameters, we can control where in town that those type of establishments can be built. We will have to be properly enforce our rules and oversight of them, making sure that they're safe and secure, and that will involve our building department and our police department, but as more and more are built around the states, we'll be more comfortable with them and more secure in how they're run.
Thank you. Mr. DeCoursey.
Yes, the select board has a very important initial role in the approval of retail marijuana establishments, and that's the entering of a host community agreement with a prospective retailer. If on the select board, I will work on that policy to ensure that there are proper business plans provided, proper security plans provided, and proper safeguards. There are a number of other agencies that oversee recreational marijuana, the redevelopment board, the Board of Health, and the State Cannabis Commission, but the select board acts first in entering into the host community agreement.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with you, Mr. DeCoursey. Comment on Article 79, I assume that's this year's town meeting warrant, that proposes a parking exemption program for medical and financial hardships.
Yeah, so Article 79, actually, there was a hearing just the other night at the select board And the select board oversees parking, that there was actually action taken by the board to address some of the concerns for the hardship. So while the vote was no action, there's going to be a change in the select board's policy in terms of how hardships are approved. And one of the big issues was individuals would have to come in before the select board, and it was felt that that's an uncomfortable setting for a number of the type of hardships that need to be presented. So there's going to be a more administrative type function and approval process, and if that process fails, there would be an appeal to the full board. I support that moving it more towards an administrative function with more objective standards.
Thank you. Mr. Tosi?
I do know on this particular issue, even the Disabilities Committee did vote against that warrant article, but are in favor of the being more sensitive of the needs and that the petitioner has for their particular parking needs, so it doesn't have to be so public at the selectman's office. It does need to be open and transparent as far as not being favoritism of who gets the parking, who doesn't. Parking is always and will be a difficult issue in Arlington. New acting police chief Julie Flaherty is doing coffees around town. She did one at the senior center the other day, and she's working hard on enforcing parking regulations, especially around Alewife, so that there's not all-day parkers there and then walking over to Alewife in our neighborhoods.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Tosi. A warrant article proposes to change the membership of the Arlington Redevelopment Board from those 4 members appointed by the town manager to 4 members elected by the voters of the town. Please comment.
I think that would be a good proposal. I think maybe a combination of both, because it's important to have people with expertise on the ARB. I always like to be able to have the voters have a chance and a choice in who serves on our boards. That's why the ARB currently has at least an appointee from the governor, so that it's not all, it allows somebody from, that's not partial to be part of the deliberation. So maybe 2 board members being elected and 2 members being appointed would be a nice transition in that committee. But I'd have to look into that more.
Thank you. Mr. DeCoursey?
Yeah, this is an area where Bob and I disagree. I continue to support the appointed redevelopment board, 4 members appointed by the town, 1 member appointed by the state. We had the discussion earlier about the treasurer's office and the need for an appointed treasurer. The redevelopment board is a panel of experts in some areas, and you want to make sure that you have the right mix and actually keep politics out of it. And so if you split 2 appointed and 2 voted, and you need an architect on the redevelopment board, who's to say you're going to get the architect? So I would continue to support an appointed board.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with you, Mr. DeCoursey. What would you bring to the select board that is currently lacking?
Well, one thing I'd bring to the select board is geographic diversity in terms of where I live. I would be the only member who lives east of Pleasant Street. And while we represent the whole town, and I want to represent the whole town, I actually grew up in the Heights, but I live in East Arlington. That is one area that I would bring, and there are issues that are unique that each select board member would need to address. I had a discussion just the other day with a parent at the Hardy School, and there's a real issue there in terms of parking between where teachers can park because the staff has grown so much, and playground space, and it's scarce there. And that's an issue I saw as a parent of Hardy students, and something I could bring to the board in terms of that knowledge of a different part of town.
Thank you. Mr. Tosi?
The Arlington Board of Selectmen needs an independent voice, and that's who I am. I'm an independent voice for all of Arlington. And I'm going to vote and deliberate both with my head and my heart, and that's how I lead my life, and that's how I will serve on the Board of Selectmen, how I've always been serving this town of Arlington. the Board of Selectmen needs people that are going to listen, not just talk, but listen to what the community has to say, even if they do disagree, to hear out those different options and possibilities and explain why that might not have been pursued, and then go forward with the best possible option after that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with Mr. Tossi for the next question. Are you in favor or against removing the Arlington Police Department chief position from civil service, and why?
There are cases to be made for both, and we've gone back and forth at this town meeting over the decades, having a police chief be in both ways, civil service and appointed. I mean, I'm very happy with Julie Flaherty as our acting police chief. I think she's doing a wonderful job. It's good to have a diversity of have a female police chief. So I'm thrilled to have her currently. And Fred Ryan was a wonderful police chief. I was sorry to see him leave. He served us so well and was a model police chief for this entire country in his work that he has done here. But I haven't made my decision on how I feel is the best way to go forward on police chief.
Thank you. Mr. DeCourcy?
Yes. So for this next hire, I support a candidate coming internally out of the Arlington Police Department, and I don't support a change in civil service for this hire for the next police chief. And 4 years ago, when Chief Ryan almost left the Arlington Police Department, the town manager announced that he would hire the next candidate from within the department. I think that created a reasonable expectation for police officers that if he ever did leave after he came back, that the same hiring practice would take place. So for this hire and for this warrant article, I oppose removing the position from civil service.
Thank you. Next question, we start with Mr. DeCourcy. We have lost 8 parking places within a block of Mass Ave and Lake Street. What can we do to improve parking for the East Arlington businesses?
Yeah, and parking, I just mentioned it with the Hardy School, and parking is a real problem in Arlington. And in East Arlington, I didn't know the number that was lost, but it's, I don't have a good answer in terms of creating parking spaces down there. I think in other parts of town, Arlington Center, we've gone to meters, and that seems to have turned over spaces. There are areas that perhaps you can look at the lining of the spaces to see if there's a way to create more, but it's limited space and increased demand, and it's something that will always have a challenge. Now, the one thing we could do is encourage other uses, and to the extent that there were more people living near businesses in East Arlington, maybe they won't be using cars, but it's a real problem.
Thank you. Mr. Tosi?
Parking will always be an issue and never go away. But as Steve mentioned, hopefully there'll be other usages. More and more people are biking and commuting that way and using our bike lanes. We're trying to increase the efficiency of the MBTA and bus routes along the transit corridor there. It's been suggested that we maybe go to resident stickers to be available to all residents and then require them on particular streets where there is parking problems and post it that way so that you would have to have that resident sticker to park on those particular streets to keep those free for residents or other purposes. And I know we did lose some parking when we did redo the East Arlington neighborhood and development and increase it where we could. But it was definitely important to dedicate those spots for handicap parking because those are the people that need those spots closer more than anybody. So I was in favor of designating those spots as such. Thank you.
Thank you. This will now be the last question before we go to the closing statements, and we will start with Mr. Tosi. There is a warrant article to allow legal residents who are not citizens to vote in Arlington local elections. Where do you stand on this issue?
For legal residents who are not citizens to...
Sometimes referred to as green card holders?
Yeah. If They're legal residents. I would like to have them be able to participate in the process and involved in our citizens and our community. I've been meeting residents and non-residents alike in front of the post office and at the library the last few weeks, and they're all engaged and interested and caring people. Even though they can't vote for me, they have concerns and they have needs and they have dreams and hopes like all of us. So I'd like to include them as much as we can in all of our engagements. Thank you.
Mr. DeCoursey?
Yeah, and this is a resolution. I support it. It's the select board has already voted on it and is for this as well. The people who are paying taxes, they're here legally, and I certainly would support the resolution.
Thank you. We'll now go to the closing statements in reverse ballot order. You each have 1 minute to speak, and we'll start with Mr. Tosi.
Thank you. The only endorsement that matters in this election is the endorsement of the voters of Arlington. It is your right to vote, your right to choose who you want to serve on the select board. Arlington needs an independent voice, and I can be the independent voice for you, for our children, for our seniors, and for all of Arlington. I still will, as an independent voice, work collaboratively with my fellow colleagues on the select board, as I have with all of the officials throughout my time here in Arlington. My entire adult life I have given to this community that I love and serve. I ask that you call me with any questions, suggestions, or issues you might have. My cell number is 857-998-0446. Call me. I will answer and I will talk to you. I respectfully ask for your vote on Saturday, April 6th. Thank you all.
Thank you. Mr. DeCoursey.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters and Envision Arlington for hosting this debate. I also want to thank Mr. Tosi. Finally, I would like to thank all Arlington voters who are here this evening or tuning in at home. Since I announced in January that I'm running for Select Board, I've spoken with hundreds of voters and listened to their concerns. I've also shared my vision for Arlington. I've spoken with first-time voters and seniors, new residents, as well as lifetime citizens. I grew up in the Heights. I've lived in East Arlington for the past 25 years. Whether you've lived in Arlington your whole life or just moved here yesterday, I want to represent you. I will be accessible to hear your concerns. I will tell you where I stand, and I will act independently but collaboratively with other members of the Select Board to provide leadership to Arlington. Thank you, and I respectfully request your vote on April 6th.
Thank you. I would like to thank the candidates for running for office. And also for adhering to the timing schedule. I would also like to thank the town meeting member candidates who are here this evening, and I would also like to thank the Arlington League of Women Voters for once again inviting me to come to a very interesting debate forum evening. And now Patty Muldoon will close the program.
So let's give a big hand to Margaret, our beloved facilitator. Thank you. So again, thanks all around, candidates, audience, for your questions, and for our viewing audience, and thanks to Arlington Community Media for broadcast. And I would like to mention to all of you that if you're interested in Envision Arlington or in the League of Women Voters of Arlington, please step on board. We are looking for you. Information's available in the back of the room. The League is hosting a brunch with our state legislators, and I will mention I did see Representative Sean Garbely here. So we're having a brunch. You could come. It's on April 7th. So if you want to attend, speak to one of the League members or visit our website, very easy, lwva.com, for additional details. And we have a government primer, which was previously compiled based on 6 Citizens Corner articles published in the Arlington Advocate, and they are available through the town's website. I would also mention that tomorrow night in this very room, Heat Smart is having our grand kickoff for the town, so please consider coming back. That's tomorrow at 7 right here. to improve our carbon footprint. Candidates Night has been broadcast live from Town Hall on tonight, March 27th, 2019, and a rebroadcast schedule is available. You can find them in the Advocate and online at acmi.tv. To all of the voters here tonight and throughout the town, please remember to vote with all this great information you've learned. The date is Saturday, April 6th. Polls are open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So thank you for coming tonight and for watching. This forum has been sponsored by Envision Arlington and League of Women Voters of Arlington. Thank you.